The day my son showed up at my lake house with a woman I'd never met. And 2 overstuffed duffel bags. I knew something was wrong before he even opened his mouth. It was a Saturday in late September, the kind of morning I live for up here. The water perfectly still, mist sitting low over the surface. A pot of fresh coffee going on the stove. I'd been retired for 8 months by then, and honestly, those quiet Saturday mornings at the lake were the whole reason I'd worked as hard as I had for 30 years. I'd earned this. Every single inch of it. My name isn't important. Most people around here just call me by my last name anyway. But for the sake of this story, you can call me by what my son called me for the first 23 years of his life before he apparently forgot how. Mom. His name is Seth. He's 26. And the woman standing behind him on my porch, half hidden behind a giant canvas tote bag, was someone I had never seen before in my life. Mom. He said it like he was surprised I was home, in my own house, on a Saturday. We were in the area. My lake house is 4.5 hours from the city where Seth lives. You do not end up in the area by accident. You plan it. You pack 2 duffel bags and a canvas tote and a rolling cooler. Yes, there was also a rolling cooler. And you drive 4.5 hours on purpose. And you are? I said, looking at the woman. She smiled. It was a smile I would come to recognize over the next several days. Bright, practiced, and completely empty of warmth. I'm Tessa, she said. Seth's girlfriend. I've heard so much about you. I hadn't heard a single word about Tessa. Not one. Seth had mentioned, maybe 6 weeks earlier, that he was seeing someone new. And I'd asked a few questions. What does she do? Where did you meet? And he'd been vague in the way 26-year-old men are vague when they don't want their mother paying too close attention. I hadn't pushed. I figured I'd meet her eventually, at Thanksgiving or Christmas, the way these things normally go. I had not expected her to appear on my porch in late September with a rolling cooler. Come in, I said, because what else do you say? He's my son. I stepped back and held the door open, and the 2 of them hauled everything inside, and I noticed that the duffel bags were not light. These were not overnight bags. These were stay-for-a-while bags. I poured coffee. I asked the polite questions. Tessa answered most of them before Seth could, which I noted but didn't comment on. She'd grown up in Phoenix. She worked in brand consulting, which she described in a way that took 3 full minutes and left me no clearer on what it actually meant. She was 31. She liked hot yoga and cold brew, and this she volunteered without being asked. She was really into intentional living right now. I didn't know what that meant either, but I smiled and nodded. Seth, meanwhile, was doing that thing he does when he's nervous, picking at the edge of his thumbnail, not quite meeting my eyes. He's been doing it since he was 9 years old. I know every tell that boy has. So how long are you thinking? I asked. Casual, friendly, just a mom asking. Seth looked at Tessa. Tessa looked at Seth. Some kind of silent negotiation happened. We were thinking maybe through the week, Seth said. Through the week? It was Saturday? That was 7 days. We've both been so burned out. Tessa added, leaning forward with her elbows on my kitchen table like she'd been sitting at that table her whole life. The city just drains you, you know? Seth said your place is so peaceful. We really need to decompress. I looked at my son. He gave me a look that said, please don't make this weird. I took a long sip of my coffee. Sure, I said. Let me show you the guest room. Here's the thing about being 54 years old and living alone in a house you bought yourself with money. You earned yourself after a divorce that nearly broke you in half. You develop a certain relationship with your own space. It's yours. Every corner of it. You know where everything is. You know which floorboard creaks. You know the exact angle of the afternoon light through the kitchen window. You've arranged your life in a specific way, and that arrangement is not accidental. It's the result of years of figuring out what you actually need to be okay. I need mornings to be quiet. I need 8 hours of sleep. I need my kitchen to be clean when I wake up. Because starting the day in a clean kitchen is one of the small things that makes me feel like my life is in order. By Sunday morning, all 3 of those things were gone. I woke up at 6:30 to the sound of Tessa on a phone call. She was in the living room, speaking at full volume, the kind of volume that says I have no idea walls exist. Something about a client deliverable and a brand narrative, and how the colors were completely off palette. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling for a few minutes before I accepted that sleep was over. The kitchen sink was full of dishes from the night before. Not just glasses and plates. There were pots. Multiple pots. Tessa had, apparently, decided to cook dinner after I went to bed. A dinner I hadn't been invited to or informed about. Which had involved what looked like every pan I owned. The cooler, I now understood, had been full of specialty ingredients. Organic this, artisanal that, things I'd never heard of, and didn't have a place for in my refrigerator, which they'd rearranged to fit. I stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment, taking it in. Then I made my coffee, sat down at the table, and told myself to breathe. Seth came down around 9, hair still damp from the shower. He kissed me on the cheek. That part was nice, and poured himself a cup of coffee and sat across from me, and for a few minutes it was almost like it used to be, just the two of us at the kitchen table. Tessa's amazing, right? He said. She seems very energetic, I said. He laughed a little. She's a lot, I know, but she grows on you, Seth. I kept my voice even. You could have called ahead, given me a little warning. I know, Mom. I'm sorry. It kind of came together last minute. 4.5 hours with a packed cooler is not last minute, but I let it go. I asked him how work was going. He does something in software, project management, nothing I fully understand, and he said it was fine, same as always. And then Tessa came downstairs in what appeared to be a full athleisure set and announced that she needed the Wi-Fi password because the signal in the guest room was too weak for her work calls. I thought you two were decompressing, I said. Oh, I still have to work, she said. I just need to decompress around the work, you know? The environment matters so much. She smiled that empty smile. Seth says you have a really good setup here. Fast internet, big porch, peaceful. That's honestly what I need right now. I gave her the Wi-Fi password. What I did not do was point out that my setup was for my retirement, not for someone else's remote work situation. I did not say that if she needed fast internet for work calls, perhaps she should have stayed in the city where she lived. I did not say any of the things I was thinking. I have been too polite my whole life. It has cost me a great deal. The requests started small. That's how it always works, I've learned. You don't walk into someone's home and immediately announce your demands. You ease in. You establish that you belong there. And then, once you've established that, you start making yourself comfortable in ways that have nothing to do with being a guest, and everything to do with being in charge. By Monday, Tessa had relocated her workstation from the guest room to my kitchen table. This meant that the kitchen table, where I ate my meals, read my books, drank my morning coffee in peace, was now covered in her laptop, 2 external monitors she'd apparently brought, a ring light, various cables, and a collection of notebooks and sticky notes. When I came downstairs Monday morning, she was already set up and on a call, speaking with great authority about something called audience segmentation. I made my coffee and took it out to the porch. It was nice on the porch. I reminded myself of that. Monday afternoon, Seth found me out back, sitting in the Adirondack chair I'd had for 15 years. Hey, Mom? Something in his voice made me put my book down. So, Tessa has kind of a specific thing about food, he said. He wasn't looking at me directly. He was looking at the lake. She's on this protocol right now. A wellness protocol. And it's pretty specific. I waited. She needs things prepared a certain way. Like there are certain oils she can't have, and she's off gluten right now. And she needs her protein measured, like actually measured, in grams. And she has to eat at specific times because of her metabolic schedule. He paused. I was wondering if you could maybe accommodate that while we're here. I stared at him. She can't cook for herself, I asked. She doesn't really cook, Seth said. She cooks Sunday night, at midnight, in every pot I own. She had a craving, that was a one-time thing. Like on a day-to-day basis she needs someone to prepare her food. She's always had someone do it. He said this in a tone that suggested this was completely normal. Back home she uses a meal prep service. Right, Seth, I said slowly. I'm not a meal prep service. I know, Mom, I know, but she's really sensitive about her wellness routine. If she gets off it, it affects everything. Her work, her mood, her sleep, everything. I looked at my son, at his face, at the hopeful, nervous, slightly apologetic expression he was wearing, and I thought about all the times over the years I had done things I didn't want to do because I loved him and didn't want to disappoint him. And I thought about how far that pattern had gotten me in life, and in my marriage, and in all the other places where I had made myself small to keep the peace. Let me think about it, I said. He looked relieved. He should not have looked relieved. That evening, while Seth and Tessa were down at the dock watching the sunset, my dock on my lake, I sat at the kitchen table that I'd reclaimed after Tessa packed up for the day, and I thought about what exactly was happening in my own house. My son had shown up unannounced with a woman I'd never met. They had installed themselves for a week, possibly longer. No one had confirmed any departure date. This woman had taken over my kitchen table as her office. She expected her meals prepared to specific dietary parameters by a schedule that matched her metabolic needs. She conducted loud work calls at all hours. She had rearranged my refrigerator. And then there was the other thing. The thing Seth had said the night before, casually, almost as an aside, that had lodged itself somewhere in my chest and hadn't moved. We'd been sitting on the porch, the three of us, after dinner. The sun was going down over the water, painting everything gold and pink, and Tessa had looked around with an expression I can only describe as appraising. The way you look at something you're considering buying. This place, Essis, she said. Like, the location alone. Do you have any idea what this would go for on the market? I'm not planning to sell, I said. Oh, I know, she said. But have you ever thought about like the next chapter? Like what happens when maintaining a property this size becomes a lot for one person? I was 54 years old. I had hiked 8 miles the previous weekend. I manage fine, I said. Oh, totally. You're so capable, she said, which is somehow one of the most condescending things a person can say. I just mean like longer term. Like Seth worries about you out here all alone. I looked at Seth. Seth was looking at the lake. I've been alone out here for 4 years, I said. I like it. Of course you do, Tessa said. And it's so beautiful. I'm just saying, there are so many options. Like Seth and I have been talking about our long-term goals, and we've been looking at properties, and the market in this area is actually really. Tessa, Seth said, quietly. She stopped. She touched his arm. She smiled at me. I just love this place, she said. I hope someday it stays in the family. I'd gone to bed shortly after that. I'd lain awake for a long time. She wanted my lake house. That was what this was. That was the whole thing. I have a neighbor named Bob. He's 72 years old, retired county judge, lives half a mile up the road in a house he's owned since 1987. We have coffee together most Tuesday mornings. He knows everything about property law in this state, and he knows more about my finances than most people, because we've helped each other through various things over the years. His wife's illness, my divorce, the property dispute I had with the original contractor who built my dock. Tuesday morning, I walked up to Bob's house at 8 o'clock and told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I appreciate about Bob. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. How is the property titled? He asked. Solely in my name, I said. Has been since the divorce. Any joint accounts with Seth? Anything that would give him any kind of legal foothold? No, I separated everything after the divorce. Seth is the beneficiary on my life insurance and my retirement accounts, but that's it. The property itself is mine outright. Bob nodded slowly. Then she doesn't have any legal angle. What she has is an influence angle. She's working on the relationship. He paused. She's 31, you said. Yes. And Seth is 26. Yes. How long have they been together? I thought about it. He mentioned someone new maybe 6 or 7 weeks ago. So, not long. Bob looked at me over the rim of his mug. And she's already making herself at home in your kitchen and talking about what happens to the property long term. Yes. Well, he said and picked up his coffee. That's quite a schedule. I went home with a clearer head and a plan. Not a dramatic plan. Not a confrontational plan. I am not a dramatic person by nature, despite what the last several days might suggest. What I had was a quiet plan. A precise one. Step 1. I called my attorney and asked her to refresh my memory on a few things. Specifically about what it would take legally for anyone to challenge a property title in this state. The answer she confirmed was, a great deal. It would take fraud or incapacity or a very specific set of circumstances that did not apply to me. My house was my house. Step 2. I called Seth's father. My ex-husband, Gerald, and I have a complicated relationship. 30 years of marriage will do that. But we agree on one thing, which is that Seth is a good kid who sometimes needs people to be straight with him. I told Gerald what was happening. He was quiet for a moment and then said, "That's fast work in the dry way he has." He said he'd reach out to Seth. Step 3. I went back to my own house. Tessa was at the kitchen table on a call. Seth was on the porch reading something on his phone. I went upstairs, and I did what I had been meaning to do since Monday morning. I packed up the second external monitor that Tessa had propped on my kitchen table using my good cookbooks as a stand. I carried it upstairs and put it outside the guest room door. Then I went back down, set the table for lunch, and started cooking. Seth came in from the porch a while later and watched me for a moment. "You okay, Mom?" "Fine," I said. "Lunch is at 12:30. Tessa has a call until 1 ends," he said. "Lunch is at 12:30, I said again pleasantly. He hovered. "She kind of needs to eat on her schedule." I turned from the stove and looked at him. Not an angry look, not a hurt look, just a clear look. The kind of look I had given him exactly twice in his life before. Once when he was 15 and lied to me about where he was, and once when he was 20 and made a decision that could have derailed everything. "Seth," I said. "Sit down." He sat. I turned back to the stove, finished what I was doing, and then I sat across from him and I said what I should have said on Saturday when he showed up on my porch with someone I'd never met and bags packed for a week. "I love you," I said. "That is the first thing and the last thing, and the only thing that doesn't change no matter what we're about to talk about. Okay?" He nodded. He looked young suddenly. He always looks young when he's about to hear something he doesn't want to hear. "This is my home," I said. "I worked for 30 years to be able to retire here, and I have been here for 4 years. And in those 4 years I have built a life that I am genuinely happy with. That is not nothing. That took a long time. And I am not going to have it disrupted. Not by anyone, not even by you, not even because I love you." He opened his mouth. "I'm not finished," I said gently. "Tessa seems like a person who knows what she wants. I respect that, but what she wants cannot come at the cost of what I have. The kitchen table is my kitchen table. My kitchen is not a prep service. My house is not a free remote work retreat. My property," I held his gaze, "is mine. It will remain mine. I want you to hear that clearly." Seth was very still. "Did she say something?" he asked. "About the property?" "She made some observations," I said, "on the porch the other night." He closed his eyes briefly. He put his hands flat on the table and looked at them. "Mom," he said quietly, "I'm sorry. She gets excited about things and she doesn't always." He stopped, started again. "I didn't know she said that. About the house." "I know you didn't," I said. "That's why we're talking now." We sat there a moment. "I think you need to figure out some things," I said. "About who this person is, about what she's excited about. And I think you need to figure it out soon. Because 6 weeks is not very long to know someone. And some of the things she's excited about seem to involve my retirement savings and my lake house. And I need you to understand that I have been very patient and very quiet for the last several days, while I figured out how to say this to you. And what I'm saying is, I see what's happening, and I love you too much to pretend I don't." Seth didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, "She's not a bad person, Mom." "I hope not," I said honestly. "I don't know her well enough to say. But I know what I saw and what I heard, and I know that you deserve someone who is excited about you, not about what you might one day have access to. And I think somewhere you know the difference because you've always been a smart kid." He looked at me. "Dad called me this morning," he said. "I know," I said. He almost smiled at that, almost. Lunch was at 12:30. Tessa came downstairs at 1:05, visibly annoyed that her timing hadn't been accommodated, and found Seth and me finishing the last of our food. "Oh," she said. She looked at the table. "I thought we were waiting." "There's a plate for you in the oven," I said. "Keeping warm." She looked at Seth. He looked at his plate. "Tessa," he said, "can we talk after lunch? Just us?" Something shifted in her. Not much. She was good at composure, but something shifted. "Of course," she said and sat down and smiled at me and said the food smelled lovely. "Thank you," I said. I have genuinely no idea what Seth said to her. I went for a walk, 2.5 miles down the lake road and back, and when I returned, the energy in the house was different. Quieter. Seth was on the porch alone, looking at the water. The rolling cooler was gone from the entryway. He turned when I came up the steps. "We're going to head out tomorrow morning," he said. "Okay," I said. "I'm sorry, Mom, for just showing up. For not thinking about how this would be." I sat down in the chair across from him. The light was going golden over the water, the same way it had been the night Tessa had looked at my house like an appraiser. "You don't need to apologize for showing up," I said. "You're always welcome here. You know that." I paused. What you might think about is that welcome has two sides to it. I extend it and you honor it. Those are both necessary. Is she okay? I asked. Not because I was overly worried about Tessa's, but because Seth cared about her, and he's my son, his feelings matter to me. She's fine. He was quiet a moment. She grew up with money and then her family lost a lot of it, and I think she's been looking for stability ever since. I'm not making excuses. I'm trying to understand. That's a fair thing to try to do, I said. Just make sure she's trying to understand you too. And not just your assets. He winced a little, but he didn't argue. We had dinner together that evening, the three of us, and it was not warm exactly, but it was civil. Tessa helped clear the table without being asked, which I chose to see as a positive sign. She did not mention the property. She told a story about a trip she'd taken to New Mexico that was actually interesting. I asked a few questions. She answered them like a real person. Maybe that was the beginning of her growing on me. Or maybe it wasn't. I didn't know yet. What I knew was this. The lake was still out there. The mist would still be on the water at first light. And when I woke up Wednesday morning, the kitchen would be mine again. Clean, quiet, exactly the way I'd left it. And I would make my coffee and sit at my table and look out at the water and be exactly where I was supposed to be. They left the next morning at 9. Seth hugged me for a long time in the driveway, the way he used to when he was small and going back to school after summer. Tessa hugged me briefly and thanked me for having them, and I said it was no trouble. Which was not entirely accurate but felt like the right thing to say. I stood in the driveway and watched them drive away. Then I went inside, washed the 2 cups from breakfast, and stood at the kitchen window looking at the lake. It was a Tuesday. Bob and I had missed our coffee. I picked up my phone and texted him, "All clear. Coffee tomorrow?" He replied within a minute. "I'll put the pot on." I set the phone down and looked at the water for a while. My house. My lake. My quiet, hard-won, entirely mine life. I had not given an inch of it, and I was not going to.